All right, welcome back. It's been a minute. Sorry, I was sick. The government was shut down. The world's on fire. It's just a normal week in D.C., but, you know, holidays and whatnot. I like to call this period that we have just entered into as American Ramadan. For those that are not familiar with the Muslim faith, Ramadan is like a month where you don't eat. It's a religious thing. We don't have that in America. I mean, unless you're Muslim, and then I'm sure you do. But like Christians and Jews and everything, we don't have a Ramadan. But America as a country has a Ramadan. It starts a few days before Thanksgiving and ends when everyone wakes up from their hangover after New Year's. If you expect to get anything done in the government during that time, good fucking luck. So welcome to American Ramadan. That's where we're at right now. People are going to be far less responsive than you would like them to be. You're welcome. That's what working with the government is like. As everybody knows at this point, I'm sure I've brought it up a bazillion times. So I spent quite a few years in the U.S. Special Operations Command. SOCOM, as it's known, has always been at the forefront. I mean, we're talking about back since like World War II, before SOCOM, when it was the OSS, the Office of Strategic Services. Always doing really cool shit with technology. Cool and weird and different. The OSS famously kicked around the idea of a bat bomb before the nuclear bomb was ready. And you're like, what is a bat bomb? A bat bomb is exactly what it sounds like. Bats like to be out at night. The OSS thought maybe if we took like little washing machine timers and then we loaded those with explosives and then we put those on bats and then we put the bats in a bomb and released the bombs, the bat bombs, from airplanes, and they released before they hit the ground. Like the bomb opened up before they hit the ground, that the bats would fly out and seek darkness. Well, in Japan at the time, many of the homes were still made of wood. So as these bats find homes in attics, cellars, dark, creepy places out of the sunlight, those washing machine timers would eventually go off and basically set all of Japan on fire, or at least wherever the bats had access to. That was like a real idea that got real funding back in the day. I think it was something like $800,000 was dedicated to prototyping bat bombs when we weren't exactly sure if the nuclear weapon was going to work. SOCOM has a long history of doing weird shit with weird things. So if you're not familiar with the C-130, the C-130 airplane is a cargo airplane. It's large. It's generally the size of large commercial jetliner. It's a little bit wider. It moves cargo. It's the fucking UPS van of the military. You can do a lot of things with C-130s, and if you start looking up the different variants, you'll have C-130, this, that, and the other, A, B, C, D, G, D, whatever. It doesn't matter. The part that matters about the name of the C-130 and the things that come before or after it are SOCOM has a very specific variant of this. They have the AC-130. So that is the assault / cargo C-130. This motherfucker's got machine guns. It's got like an artillery system on there. When this thing rolls into theater, the bad guys run, I promise you. I have been on the beneficial end of an AC-130 many, many times. It is one of the greatest things that we have. My hat's off to everybody who flies those things, guns those things. Incredible piece of just American dominance. Check. Okay. That said, at times, SOCOM has been like, well, what else can we do with a C-130? Not maybe the AC variant, just a regular ass C variant, C-130. Well, at the time when General Slife was the vice commander, he was like, dude, he's like, I think we could like put missiles and like shit on pallets and just push them out the back. Like we could make the C-130 a bomber. And we could like throw things out of the back of it. Like we parachute out of the back of the C-130 all the time. You can throw human beings out of the back. Why couldn't you throw weapons out? Now, I don't know whatever happened to that problem or that project, but SOCOM has always thought about weird and new and interesting ways to employ the C-130 because we have like a bazillion of them and they're generally easy to modify. So this week in tech news, Reuters snapped a photo of an AC-130J. So AC being the assault, kick in the door, kill the fucking bad guys version with the artillery and the machine guns on the side. When I say machine guns, I mean like Dillon Arrow miniguns that shoot like 7,000 rounds a minute. Like at night when the machine gun goes off, like it looks like a laser beam. It's sick. The AC-130J, so just the newest variant of the AC-130. Reuters snapped a picture of one down in Puerto Rico. I don't know how good everybody is here at their geographies, but Puerto Rico is real close to Venezuela. They snapped a picture of an AC-130J in Puerto Rico with Hellfire missiles on the wings. Attack helicopters typically have Hellfires, and famously MQ-9s, the big drones, have fires, and maybe there's some aircraft that carry them. I think they have different munitions, but like whatever. These are wing-mounted things that usually go on helicopters and other kind of like fighter aircraft. In this case, they've not only got the machine guns that look like laser beams, literally like an artillery cannon, but instead of pointed up, it's pointed down. But now they have Hellfire missiles on the side. If anyone had any question about like how serious the Department of War is taking the president's orders to deal with Venezuela, we now have like this like hybrid, almost like old school Soviet Hind looking AC-130 with missiles on the wings, machine guns, and basically a cannon to do air to ground just destruction. I don't know if this thing is one of many, if it's one of one, but like that just seems like a really good use of an aircraft that we have a whole lot of, while we're trying to figure out like why the F-35 costs so much and when the fuck the F-47 is going to show up, if ever. Just strapping Hellfires on basically everything is a pretty doji thing to do. Just my thought. There's your tech news for the week. There's your tech news for the week. This show is for people in startups and small businesses. Here's a tip. Think of new ways to use old shit. If your cool thing straps on some old thing and you'd be like, hey, I could put that on a C-130 or I don't know, find some other old piece of shit that no one likes to use anymore and strap your new thing on it. That's a business model right there, ladies and gentlemen. Okay. All right. So just generally White House, general federal government. We got through the government shutdown. Yay. We're still on a continuing resolution. Boo. Things will continue to carry on as they do. It's pretty much become status quo that we're in a continuing resolution all the time. Congress has not yet passed the appropriations bills that they need to bring it to the president. So it's not really the president's fault, but like the shutdown and everything, like the U.S. government is not moving at its full pace and potential, and that's just the way it is. The issues that we have always with continuing resolutions is it limits funding to the lower funding level of previous years' appropriations. It doesn't allow new starts. So if you had something that was supposed to kick off in fiscal year 26, it's not going to happen. This creates real problems in some of these major defense acquisition programs and the modernization efforts we have, like the Columbia-class sub. That's why they get anomalies, which means that they're the only things with new starts. Everybody else is fucked. So that's basically the point there. So I'd say that if in terms of how out of 100%, what level is the government running at right now? If a government shutdown is 0, maybe not 0, there's always the accepted people. That's maybe like 10%. We're like operating at like a 50 right about now. So don't expect too much more than 50% normally. And now again, welcome to American Ramadan. You're probably going to get 40% performance out of our government at the moment. So just be aware. Happy holidays, everyone. All right. Okay. So great, Mike. Thanks. What the fuck do I do with that? Well, what you do with that is you prep and you prepare, because when this thing breaks free and everyone decides to come back to work in the New Year's and they get the appropriations bills passed and we have a new federal budget for fiscal year 26, shit is going to move fast. Do not wait until then to do things. Take this time. This is what we call the lull in the fight, the calm before the storm, if you will. Take advantage of this point to prep your shit for when the handcuffs do come off, you are ready to strike. Like a fucking rattlesnake. Okay, cool. All right, on to Congress. Nothing's going on with the appropriations bills yet. Both the House and the Senate have done their bills. They are in a process right now called conference, where the House and the Senate argue back and forth and try to figure out how to make one bill that looks exactly the same. Real quick on what conference means just generally for the American public. The House passes a bill and the Senate passes a bill. This is like Schoolhouse Rock shit, right? The House passes a bill, the Senate passes a bill. They're not going to be the same. The Senate has priorities, the House has priorities. Currently, we have a uni-party government where the president, the House, and the Senate are all Republican. But there's still even discrepancies in those bills that they pass. Forget about like when you have a split government and between the House and the Senate, you get even more difference. But anyways, the bills are never going to be the same. Everybody's got their own priorities and so on and so forth. So this process of conference brings the members and the staff of the appropriations committees together to negotiate, discuss, argue over what the final bill that they'll bring back to their chambers, pass again, and then ultimately go to the president's desk. So this is generally how this happens. There's like three buckets. There's the yes, we all agree on all of this stuff bucket. Okay, cool. Let's just agree on those and get those out of the way. Then there's the we do not agree on these at all. And if it's at the staff level, the members have to deal with it. If it's at the member level and they are still in the no bucket, then it goes to leadership. There are issues that are so contentious that literally it'll be the House, the Speaker of the House, the Senate Majority Leader, and like a couple other select folks in like a 10-person room, like arguing over like the worst shit that nobody can come to terms with. That's all the no bucket. Then there's the middle bucket where the negotiation happens, the horse trading, if you will. Well, I want these 10 things and you hate them. Well, I have these 10 things and you hate them. All right. How much shit sandwich is everybody going to eat in the middle? That's where actually the good governance of our system comes into play, because if no one's happy with the bill, it's actually a good bill for the American people. Keep this in mind. So anyway, so that's going on right now. We do not have an appropriations bill yet. We are in conference. That's all being negotiated out. The continuing resolution that we're under right now expires at the end of January, and we all hope to have a fully functioning 100% operational government come February 1st. It would be phenomenal. Okay, moving on. Moving on to our Article 1, Section 8 part of the Congress, to govern the rules of land and naval forces, as opposed to Article 1, Section 9, no funds will be drawn from the Treasury without the appropriation of Congress. Don't get them twisted. The NDAA has dollars in it for whatever reason, but those are not real. That's monopoly money. But what is real are the words. So the House and the Senate have also passed their own versions of the bill. Conference has been ongoing. To date, we have not seen a conference report or a final bill text, but according to CQ, one of our local Capitol Hill CQ is Congressional Quarterly, the CQ magazine and media outlet, is reporting that House and Senate negotiators are close to final compromise on the NDAA, and they are leadership is altering it in last minute ways so it can gain the votes that it needs to pass. No big surprise there. There's great shit in both bills. SPEED Act, Forge Act, aspects of the Defense Innovation Reform or the War Innovation Reform that's in there, the PAEs, there's stuff in there for DIU, all kinds of great legislation that supports the community, and we love that. Great. CQ says the bill could be filed as early as today, Friday maybe, could go through the weekend. These are not easy negotiations, because when you get down to those last hard no issues, literally, like I said, it's half a dozen people in the room really fighting it out. And that's the way our founders envisioned this. But CQ is also reporting that one of the several hotly debated provisions is reauthorization of the SBIR program. No big surprise there. Okay, so let's talk about this real quick. As we have before in a typical 2-year session of Congress, about 20,000 pieces of legislation will be introduced. Yeah, for real. You look it up. All you have to do is go on congress.gov, go to last session of Congress, and just look at all of the bills introduced. I think it's about 20,000. Like 200 actually get passed. Half of them are nonsense, naming parks and mountaintops after people, post offices and whatnot. The NDAA is one of the important ones that actually has to get passed. I bring that point up that there is not a lot of bills that pass every year, and the NDAA, even for things outside of the jurisdiction of the Armed Services Committee, the military, get placed in there because it is a very consistent piece of legislation that gets passed year after year after year. It's called a vehicle, and that vehicle is widely known to carry a bunch of other committees' legislation because it'll get passed. Standalone legislation does not get passed very frequently in our Congress. It has to ride on these larger vehicles and these larger packages. So while SBIR is widely known as a tool in defense, now war technology, and the Department of War is the largest user of the SBIR program, Small Business Innovation Research, it's actually an SBA program, Small Business Administration. So while it is not actually a Department of War program, the reauthorization usually rides in the NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act, because it's so important to the Department of War. That is a hotly contested issue this year, as we all know. We are, over 2 months into the new fiscal year, and SBIR is dead still today. All right. So before we get into the SBIR issue, here's the point on why the NDAA matters, not just generally for the country and it tells the military what to do, but for you. Read the words in the NDAA. Use the words that they use when you communicate what you do. There are signals in there on how to communicate with Congress in a way that they want to be communicated with. There are ways that you can shape your business around the things that are going to happen as you look through the provisions of the Speed and the Forge Act and you say, wow, that's something that applies to me. Or, oh, I would like to do business like that rather than this old crappy way. Start shaping and shifting towards that as you see these things start moving their way through legislation. Unlike the commercial market, that is basically just the Hunger Games every day. Go out, find customers, try to sell them. And if you don't, you don't. There's a lot of signals that we get from the department, from Congress, and then the Department of War in the National Defense Authorization Act, in the appropriations bills, that signal the things that are going to happen in the Department of War before they happen. Lean into that. It's an amazing source of intelligence on where the government and where the department is going. And if you can get ahead of that cycle, I mean, you win. So read it. I mean, they're awful. They're like, 4,000 pages long. You don't have to read every word of it, but there's a table of contents. Find the things about acquisition reform and speed and modernization and the things that have to do with the subject matters of which you create products and services for the Department of War, and just read those and understand where your industry is going. Unlike the commercial sector where everything predictive or analytical is speculatory. If it passes in the NDAA, it's law, and they have to do that. Get ahead of it. It's a business intelligence tool. Duh. All right, so let's get on to SBIR. Why is SBIR such a shit show? SBIR is currently hot garbage because generally one issue. So I say this from some sense of knowledge I was in the Senate working for Senator Joni Ernst when we reauthorized this thing last time. And Senator Joni Ernst is the chair of the Small Business Committee, who has jurisdiction over SBA, and then ultimately the entirety of the SBIR program. But also she is the chair of the Emerging Threats and Capabilities Subcommittee on the Senate Armed Services Committee, which is the place where the DIUs and the SBIRs and the AFWorks live. Therefore, she has double jurisdiction over this issue. And when I worked for her a number of years ago, we did reauthorization last time. I'm not putting words in anybody's mouth. I'm not trying to infer that I have any kind of knowledge that nobody else does. But I can tell you that the same issues that we fought over 2 years ago at reauthorization are still the issue today. I am telling you that my 2-year-old knowledge of this process is still current because it's the same fucking issue. There's a small number of companies, and when I say small, I mean small, 20, maybe 30 companies nationwide that derive most, if not all, of their revenue from the SBIR program. They are colloquially called SBIR mills. This is not the intent of the program. A program that is titled America's Seed Fund is there to grow small businesses who want to become big businesses, not to endlessly fund research and development for the sake of doing that. I'm sure these companies are great. I'm sure great people work at them, but you should be competing for the regular RDT&E dollars that fund never-ending research. You're a research company. You're not a growing, scaling small business or startup. This program is for companies that want to grow, not companies that want to endlessly do research and development projects. We have a whole other budget for that. Because these 20 or 30 companies are apparently so influential, negotiations have stalled because of caps or regulation, not regulation like in the sense of like the federal acquisition regulation, but like in regulation or management or constraints being put on the program to stop these 20 or 30 companies from basically leeching off this program. That's the problem. There should be caps. If you have, I don't know, let's just pick. If you have won 25 SBIR Phase 2s, and that still comprises most of your annual revenue, you are misusing the program. You have aligned your business to a fault in the program, and now you're just taking advantage of it. If you've got more than 25 SBIRs and most of your revenue still comes from there, you're not doing anything but science projects. That's great. Congratulations on your IP. I'm sure you're going to sell it for lots of money. I'm sure you sell your patents. I'm sure other people commercialize your technology, but that's not the point. That's not why the program exists. So any attempt to put constraints on these SBIR mills has created basically a stalemate in the negotiations. I can only assume because that's where we were 2 years ago. Advocates that are saying, hey, just give us a clean reauthorization. It's a national security issue. I just say to everybody here, that is an intellectually lazy argument. The fact of the matter is that the Department of War has not lost a single dollar because of SBIR reauthorization or non-authorization. The RDT&E dollars still exist. SBIR was a tool to pull that money off a side and funnel it to certain businesses that meet the criteria of the program. No one has lost a dollar because of this. So those that are screaming from the hills that somehow this is a national security threat, it's not. In fact, it's not. And I'm going to get into other tools that are available right now in the Department of War that can leverage these same exact dollars. So while yes, it doesn't have this really nice carve out and this really clean way to get money to small businesses, and yes, the front door was generally easy to use and people understood the process. Yes, I understand all that. But the fact of the matter is no one has lost a dollar because of this. The Department of War still has all of their RDT&E money. It's just not being used through this pipeline because that pipeline is being exploited. There's lots of great research out there on all of this. Happy to go into detail or deep dive this, but the fact of the matter is that those 20 or 30 companies return less than 1-to-1 in follow-on procurement and acquisition dollars. Real companies, real startups that get 1 or 2 or 3 SBIRs and then, bring their product to market, grow, scale, do all the things that the program is intended to do, return over a 10x multiple in follow-on contracts and revenue. And that is not counting the private capital that they raise, which if you threw that in there, it would be 20 or 30x. Period, full stop. Companies that are using the program correctly are growing, scaling, and doing exactly what we want. The whole thing is being held hostage by 20 or 30 companies who have created an entire business model around exploiting this program. Period. Full stop. That's why we're in stalemate. Today, SBIR is dead. Hopefully, in the future, we get the minimal level of reforms that we need to cut the bad actors out, let them go compete in regular RDT&E dollars, and American small businesses, startups that want to grow and scale can continue to flourish with this program. Happy to go more in depth. So that's where we're at with SBIR right now. Locked up in negotiations. It is what it is until it gets fixed. Someone's going to have to budge. I don't know who it's going to be. There's basically two camps at this point. People who understand that the program has issues, but they think the world is worse without it. And then there is a camp of people who recognize the issues and say the world is worse with it, given all the other tools that the Department of War has to do things like this, which, by the way, to be completely fair and honest, there's nothing stopping the Department of War from taking the legislative structure of SBIR and just creating their own internal program. They don't need the SBA to do this because all SBIR is a tax on the total RDT&E budget. The authority from SBA just taxes and fences 3% of the total RDT&E budget to make sure it's going to small businesses. There's nothing stopping the Department of War from just implementing that internally right now also. But we are where we are. The guidance that's come out from the department that is still current and active is fiscal year 24 projects can complete. Fiscal year 25 projects can complete. There will be no 26 solicitations, projects listed, or awards until the authorization is restarted. So right now, there are no new SBIR. Phase 1s and phase 2s from 24 or 25, given a 2-year period of performance for RDT&E dollars, are still active and can complete. SBIR 3 authorities remain in place because they do not use the taxed dollars from RDT&E. They are service dollars. Therefore, if you have a completed SBIR, go to your contracting officer and say, write me a phase 3 so that we can keep this thing moving. At this point, if you have a completed SBIR, you can get a phase 3 contract as long as they have service dollars or other dollars that are not SBIR fenced dollars to put against your phase 3. It's ultimately just a permanent contract vehicle that you have now. Just go use that, right? But we'll work this all out. No new phase 1s or phase 2s. 24s and 25s can complete. Phase 3 remains in place. That's where we're at. There's your SBIR update. It might change tomorrow. Who knows? We'll see what happens when we see the draft NDAA. If it is not in there, I don't know what vehicle is used to pass it, because there is almost nothing outside the appropriations bills moving for the remainder of the year. I would guess that the Senate Byrd rule that says you can't put something in a funding bill that is not inherently funding in nature would likely strip out an SBIR provision because it is not a funding action. It is essentially a taxing action. And I could see the Senate parliamentarian, potentially the Senate parliamentarian, literally like the referee of the Senate, pulling that out because of the Byrd rule. We'll see. Another bill that moves sometimes, similar to the National Defense Authorization Act, is the Intelligence Authorization Act. The IAA, less talked about and less known because there's typically not an unclassified version of it. But Senate and House have both reported out of committee. That's moving forward. While there is no unclassified version, there have been parts and pieces of it that have been discussed, specifically in the technology areas of sensing, autonomy, and microelectronics, signals intelligence, and electronic warfare capabilities, as well as true dual use capabilities. And when this is a hotly contested term of art, but like, to me, dual use means that product can be used in the defense military sector and the civilian sector interchangeably, right? The same GPS, personal GPS that I was issued, I could go to Bass Pro Shop and buy the same one today. To me, that's dual use. I don't know what anybody else's definition of, but people argue over it all the time. But specifically talking about dual use technologies that can easily flow between the two. You're probably never going to see an unclassed version of it. They may do a high level summary of it. That'll be about it. But that being said, what the so what in here is that the intelligence community is looking at very similar things that the Department of War is, as is the Department of Homeland Security, and they're generally looking at the same tools and methods and commercially available technologies. So if your product or service or whatever you do applies to the intelligence community, even if you don't know exactly what they're doing, if you're just following suit from what the Department of War is doing, you're probably in a pretty good spot. I would say the same applies to Homeland as well. All right. Over to the Pentagon. This gets real budget nerdy, but this is really huge. In the lapse of SBIR, which is where we are. SBIR has always been seen as the first move, your front door, the thing that I do first when I want to deal with the department. Okay, it makes sense. It's a good program when it's not corrupted. In absence of that, we need to understand and utilize the other tools that are available. And they're not a one-for-one replacement, but either learn them, figure out how to use them, or fucking quit. Like if you're like, oh, Cyber's dead, I'm not working with the Department of War anymore. Fine. Fuck off. Right? I mean, like, learn other tools or quit. One of them is a tool called the Simplified Acquisition Threshold. Back in October, the FAR guidance, the Federal Acquisition Regulation guidance for the use of simplified acquisition threshold purchases was raised to $350,000. Sorry, dude. I'm feeling like shit. Back in October, the simplified acquisition threshold was raised to $350,000. So what does that mean? That means in organizations that don't have contracting officers. So think of your larger kind of tactical level commands. For instance, I was in the Marine Special Operations Command, MARSOC. MARSOC does not have like a proper contracting officer. The people who buy the things at large scale for MARSOC are in Tampa at SOCOM headquarters at SOF AT&L, Special Operations Forces Acquisition Technology and Logistics. That's where the contracting officers and the PEOs and the PMs live. MARSOC doesn't have those. Neither does AFSOC or NSW or any of the other organizations. But they do have contracting ability through their supply shops or whoever is delegated that authority. Typically it's your supply officers, your S4, your G4, your J4s that have the authority to use simplified acquisition threshold. And in a world of you selling a thing where your individual item cost is $1 million, okay, this isn't for you. But if you sell software and your annual license is less than $350,000, you can now go play door-to-door salesman and go knocking on every unit and say, hey, you said you want to buy my thing. And they're like, yeah, I do, but I don't have any money. Well, do you not have money, or do you not have program level money? Because if you've got $350,000 of O&M sitting around that, I don't know, maybe you're not using because you're not traveling as much. Government shutdown probably caused some buildup of O&M travel budget. They can buy your software. If your widget is under $350,000 and they want to buy it as a test article or a try it before you buy it kind of thing, they can do that, right? It's got to be $350,000. There's all kinds of stipulations in here. You got to read the FAR. Basically, you can't fudge this one and be like, well, write me one contract for one thing and then another contract for another thing and then another thing, and then that's how I'll buy my $1 million thing. No, that's called a split purchase and it's illegal. But back to the software license. If your annual license or your test license or your pilot license or your fucking foot in the door so that you can sell to a customer and not wait around for the fucking government to unfuck itself, go to that user and say, hey, this annual license is $350,000. I'll give you however many seats or however you sell your shit. And they can do that at a lower unit level than when we're talking about programs of record. It's a really great way to get your foot in the door. It's a really great way to get customer feedback, customer buy-in, and it's a good starting point moving towards potentially a longer term contract, bigger contracts, or a program of record. And it is a tool that, unlike SBIR, which is dead, has actually been increased because this administration and the department see the value in being able to do almost commercial level contracting for things that don't need to go through a huge process. So simplified acquisition threshold, FAR Part 13 means faster contracting, less paperwork, fewer steps. It's easier for small businesses and traditionals, and it's used for the things you could imagine $350,000 O&M purchases for. Software, some end items that don't cost $1 million a piece. I mean, you can do the math, right? The point here is, don't wait around for an SBIR to come back online or the government to come out of continuing resolution. If your thing is ready to go today and you could sell it just like you would sell something in the commercial market, just go to them with a deliverable, tell them how much it costs, and they can write you a contract for these lower threshold dollars. Become a door-to-door salesman. Get down to every unit, get down to every user, every dude and dudette in the world that has said, oh my God, if I could buy your thing, I totally would. Call them and talk to them and ask them if they know their supply officer and if they know how to do a simplified acquisition threshold contract. You can go do that now. Go knocking on doors. It's an authority that's available to you today inside a continuing resolution because O&M is 1 year money anyways, and when they don't use it for training and then they don't use it for travel and then they don't use it for all the other things that they're not doing right now because we just came out of a government shutdown and now we're in a continuing resolution, those are the funds that build up towards the end of the year when we hear these horror stories about, oh, use it or lose it, we're going to burn all this money at the end of the year and we end up buying sticky notes and another fucking whiteboard we don't need. These are the funds that could be utilized for much better purposes. If your thing's under $350,000, go start door knocking, period. Okay, next one. CMMC, ladies and gentlemen. I am not a cyber wizard. If you want to talk to a cyber wizard, I will happily bring one on the show. There's lots going on in cybersecurity compliance. Here's what I will tell you that I know that is definitive and what matters to you, because honestly, the beeps and squeaks probably don't matter to you either, because you're probably not listening to this show. You're listening to a show about beeps and squeaks and nerd shit. So this is what I know. The DFAR, so the Defense Federal Acquisition Regulation, which is now WFAR, should be. Man, changing all the names of all this shit is going to be so fucking difficult. The DFAR, maybe in the future, the WFAR, the Defense Federal Acquisition Regulation now states, as of November 10th, the amendment allows contracting officers to embed CMMC requirements, those are your cybersecurity requirements, in solicitations for the handling of controlled information below the level of secret. So this is your controlled, unclassified information, or grossedly, I don't know if that's a word, CUI. Well, I hate saying that. But anyways, CUI information. Phase one, it's a phased approach, 3-phase approach. Right now we're in phase one, and contracting officers can start putting that in for phase one compliance, which is self-attestation, where you have to say, I'm compliant. In 2026, we'll roll into phase two, and you'll have a higher level, so on and so forth. Moral of the story is you need to get CMMC compliant at whatever level you need to for the thing that you do, or you might not be able to bid on contracts if the contracting officer or the PM or the PO decides to put a CMMC requirement into the contract. And at the end of the day, yes, is this more paperwork? Yes. Is this more hurdles and regulations? Yes. But man, we are so bad at cyber. So bad. It's important at the end of the day, and it's going to become more and more serious. And if you are not compliant and you are not on a path to get compliant, you will be cut out of opportunities. Period. Again, get compliant or fucking quit. But like, this is not something you're going to get around. Let's talk drones for a minute. God, the drones, right? What was that book? Peter Thiel wrote back in the day, 0 to 1. 0 to 1. He talked about blue oceans and red oceans, right? He actually talked about you actually want to just create a monopoly, which I'm not mad at him for saying, but whatever. Blue oceans and red oceans. You want to be in blue oceans. Blue, open, crystal clear oceans, not red oceans that are full of blood and fucking sharks and feeding frenzies, right? I couldn't imagine a more redder ocean right now in the Department of War than fucking drones. Holy shit. My mom's like starting a drone company. It's nuts. Not really. Back a couple years ago, under the last administration, a program was started called Replicator. And the idea was we're going to build hundreds of thousands of drones a year to counter the Chinese Communist Party. Love it. It didn't really hit. There's problems in execution. There's some problems in funding. I'm not pointing fingers. It's not worth rehashing the past. But the fact of the matter is it didn't really go so well. So, as you do, they brought in reinforcements. They brought in the vice commander of SOCOM to run what is called the DAWG, the Defense Autonomous Working Group. And General Donovan is going to put a bow on this whole fucking Replicator thing, buy a couple 100,000 drones, get it out the door. Well, that's kind of like a near term, like let's stop the bleeding thing and get this shit moving. More broadly across the whole administration, we've seen the drone dominance EO, which has then led to other department-wide directives and initiatives. And now they just rolled out the Department of War Drone Dominance Program, D.D.P. If you work in or around drones, Google that shit right now. D.D.P. Drone Dominance Program. This is it. They have a whole website set up for it. They have a whole challenge marketplace, and they will explain to you how they're going to do this. This is the way forward, ladies and gentlemen. If you work in or around drones, you must know this. They're going to have cycles of awards. It's going to be relatively quick. The first public cycle opened a few days ago on December 2nd. The request for information that's out on the street right now is looking for low-cost, modular, small UAS that's electronic warfare resistant. It has a high sortie reliability, aka they're not looking for a one-way attack drone that once it starts flying, it either goes and blows something up or it crashes into the ocean. They want, for this RFI specifically, they want reusable drones. They want domestic or allied supply and supply lines, supply chains, and manufacturing. That is not too outside of scope of Blue UAS and the other NDAA provisions that require U.S. or allied componentry. They're talking about manufacturing, which is amazing. And you have to have the ability to rapidly scale to thousands of units. Okay. This again is like one of the big reasons why like I'm not super heartbroken over SBIR. I don't know if we're at a point where I need another prototype. I definitely don't need another drone prototype. I promise you that. There are more than enough. Now it's, have you transitioned to scale? Can you make thousands? That's where we really need to hit the gas. And that's what this is asking for. So the D.D.P is going to replace all the ambiguity around Replicator and Hellscape and all these other things that you've heard about the things with the drones that didn't make sense. I am telling you right now, D.D.P, Drone Dominance Program, that is the authority. That's the center point. Everything else, forget about it. Doesn't matter. It's old. I don't think I need to foot stomp the importance of that anymore. If you're in drones or around drones or have anything to do with drones, if you say drones at least once a day, go to the fucking website. Period. Okay. Other things that we know are going on right now in the absence and potential maybe permanent loss of SBIR, wipe your tears, get over it, or quit. We know we're going into the January opening cycles of two amazing programs. One is called RPE, Rapid Prototyping and Experimentation Program, formerly known as the DIA, the Defense Innovation Accelerator, and the RPP, the Rapid Prototyping Program, which now have been combined into one, and it's Rapid Prototyping and Experiment. It is an opportunity for 1 to 2 year periods of performance for $6.3 or $6.4 RDT&E. That's, just think of that in a continuation. I think there's 6.8, so there's like up to 8 RDT&E types of money. 6.1 being basic research, and then 6.4, I'm gonna get the actual name of it wrong, but it's your actual like operational test and evaluation, going out, doing the thing. It's the late stage maturity of your prototype before you get ready to go into production. The RPE program cycle will open up in January. Go to USD R&E or USW R&E website. Keep track of this. It's run out of the Mission Capabilities Office, and keep your eye out for the proposals and solicitations. They're generally pretty easy to put together, 5 to 10 page proposal. They're run through OTs typically. And they're just really great. And you have a high level warfighter joint focus on all of these projects. They look very similar to the next program that I'm going to talk about, which is APFIT, where they want to see service level buy-in. These are not just science projects for the sake of science projects. These are rapid prototyping and commercialization accelerators to get your shit out of RDT&E dollars and into proc dollars and to the proverbial holy grail of programs of record, right? That's how we get here, is through these funds, not doing another SBIR, right? SBIR's, we're just going to title this one Mike Shits on SBIR all day. I mean, I think it's a good program, but fucking wipe your tears. Like, it may not come back. It's okay. There's other things. So USD R&E mission capabilities, USW R&E mission capabilities. This is what I talk about, like information operations and strategic comms. Get on message. I still fuck it up. Department of War, Undersecretary of War for Research and Engineering, mission capabilities. Go on their website, understand the program. RPE, Rapid Prototyping and Experimentation. That should open up January-ish next year. Good money. Awards, I want to say from 5 to 10 million. So again, real dollars. And then the other one that'll open up again in January is the program to accelerate the procurement and fielding of innovative technologies, the exact program that gets you out of RDT&E dollars and into low rate initial production with your first taste of production dollars ahead of and bridging the gap to your program of record that probably lives 1 or 2 fiscal years away in this magical document called the POM, the Program Objective Memorandum. That's where they plan for future programs of record. And if somebody's telling you that they want to put you on a program of record, you're probably a year or 2 out. AppFit covers the gap, awards from $10 to $50 million in procurement dollars, not RDT&E. Yay! Also run out of the Undersecretary of War for Research Engineering, Mission Capabilities Office. This is essentially their transition fund. It's great. That'll open in January. Prep your packages. You can go, they have a specific website for AppFit. Go on there, pull down the templates, start writing your white papers, start writing your quads right now. It's literally one of the easiest programs in the world to write the submission for, but you don't stand to fill in your snowball's chance in hell. I'll go with that one. Seems mildly appropriate. You don't stand a snowball's chance in hell of getting an AppFit unless you have a warfighter, like a user, a program office, a PEO, a PAE, a PM, and probably like a combatant command or requirements writer that is willing to support this, because this is not a science project. This is movement into a program of record. You got to have some buy-in on these. Super easy proposal, super difficult to win, but that's the way it should be. So that opens in January as well. These are your tools you should be thinking about that are not SBIR. Simplified Acquisition Threshold, working with DIU on OTs, working with USDR&E through the RPE on OTs, fit real procurement dollars. So when I say you should work with USDR&E on their OTs, what do you mean? I hate when people just say things and then there's no context or details, because what the fuck do I do with that? So USDR&E runs all of their OTs through a website called One Nation Innovation. One Nation Innovation is a native-owned nonprofit that hosts USW&E's solicitations. You can go on there right now. One Nation Innovation. You're going to click the box that says Go Coliseum Marketplace. Why is it called that? I don't know. Doesn't matter. Click it. You go on there and you are going to find 14. Yes, 14. Wipe your tears, Sibber Mills. No one cares. 14 active today OT opportunities with mission capabilities. And if you know anything about mission capabilities, research it at all, this is the Joint Warfighting Concept Office. This is the place that does the last touch of RDT&E dollars before these things go to war. How do I know that? Because these are the titles of their 14 currently, as of today, open solicitations. Low-cost uncrewed combat attack systems, otherwise known as LUCAS. Low-cost counter-aerial systems, CUAS. UXS swarming and autonomy. Low-cost cruise missiles. Elevated sensor and surveillance capabilities. Collaborative heterogeneous autonomous operations software. Chaos. If you make AI software, you need to know about Chaos. Sandhills, autonomous breaching and terrain shaping. If you're into engineering, if you're into ground robots, if you're into things that go boom, you should probably be in that one. Company level small uncrewed systems. So an SUAS, think company level. So this is like group 1, maybe small group 2s. A defense-wide special access program expertise accelerator. You're probably not submitting for that one. SAP is higher than TS. Most people don't, but if you know what that means and you know what Tempest means, you should probably submit to that. What else we got here? That was a SAP one. Low-cost short-range air defense, kinetic and non-kinetic prototypes. LSHORAD, air defense. Sounds a lot like Golden Dome. Weird. Prototype manufacturing facilities for low-cost uncrewed combat attack systems, LUCAS, but the manufacturing for them. If you know how to make things, specifically low-cost drones, you should probably submit. UXS, testing, mission planning, data analytics, and operations. If you run enterprise software for the mission planning, data analytics, and operations of unmanned systems, this one's for you. The Joint Rapid Fielding Activity. I haven't read through that one. Seems spooky. Check it out. And then finally, their newest one that went up, I think, yesterday, Unmanned Aerial Systems Launchers. They're looking for a thing to launch many things. If you make a thing to launch many things, or you know how to make something like that, there you go. 14 opportunities open today that will all be run through an OT to get you a prototype contract that then can be converted into a production contract. Sounds a whole fucking lot like a SBIR Phase 2 that turns into a SBIR Phase 3. So those are your opportunities outside SBIR dollars. Okay, that's that. Getting into services, there's a lot of things going on inside services right now that need to be discussed. Not everyone has a thing that can be sold to everyone. Some people make things that you have one customer, and maybe that customer is the Army or the Navy or the Air Force or the Marine Corps. It doesn't matter. But if you have service-specific interest in the Army, and lots of credit to the United States Army, I don't think anybody has leaned into the new acquisition reform faster and more aggressively than the Army, which, to be completely honest, as a Marine, I'm absolutely surprised. They tend to be the oldest and dustiest and slowest, but they are moving way ahead of everybody else in getting alignment with these new reforms that are going on. So last week, it was announced that 12 PEOs, Program Executive Offices, will be consolidated into 6 PAEs, Portfolio Acquisition Executives. That sounds like a bunch of government gobbledygook. Why are we just changing words around? Common theme in the military and government that if you change the name of something for no other purpose than to change the name, you'll get an award. That's not what's going on here. There was inherently problems with the PEO structure, that the PEO, who sounded like the person that was responsible for things, actually didn't have all the authorities that they needed. I will pick an example from, say, the Navy. The PEO, for pick one, doesn't matter, is not in charge of developing the requirement for the thing to buy. That is done by somebody in an office in the Navy that has the delineation or the naming convention of N9 something. N97 is undersea warfare. The N97 defines what undersea autonomous systems will be purchased, not the PEO for unmanned systems. Yeah, no, it doesn't make any sense. Tracking. So the Army got after this. They took their 12 PEOs and turned them into 6 PAEs. And now the PAE theoretically will have control of their budget strategy and alignment, their portfolio strategy. They will have a larger hand in requirement synchronization, and they will have program transition authority, which is huge because that means for these new PAEs that have 6-4 RDT&E dollars and the holy grail of those proc dollars for the program of record, they own the transition from one element to another, which in theory will shorten your transition in the ever spooky and scary valley of death. We'll see. It's a giant government shift, not only what they're going to do, but in the consolidation of those things. The government doesn't like to consolidate. Everybody gets a trophy for participation. Everybody wants to be in charge of something. It's highly inefficient. We know this. So they cramped everything down to 6 senior military and government officials that now own massive portfolios and have exponentially more authority than they had under the previous structure. The moral of the story here is if yesterday your customer was PEO Aviation, you should probably go figure out where PEO Aviation went, because you have a new customer. The people will probably stay the same. They'll move around org charts. But the fact of the matter is there's a different chain. There's different authorities, responsibilities, all kinds of things. You have a new customer and you need to learn that customer. The Navy, in close second, announced a while back their RAS. The Navy announced last week that they have 66 programs across 18 different acquisition lines going into the new PAE for robotics and autonomous systems. That's huge, but that's not actually the biggest part of this. Those 66 programs came down from over 200 redundant and duplicative systems across the Navy, or programs across the Navy. They have cut the fat, gone down to the programs that are absolutely necessary and required, and then put them under one person or one system of people who now have visibility of everything autonomous in the Navy. So now we're talking air, ground, if Navy has that, surface, and subsurface are now under one house. And they own all the budget and all the programs for that. That's what right looks like, ladies and gentlemen. One person with authority. We would not have a nuclear submarine today if it wasn't for one dude named Admiral Rickover, who basically was forced to stay in the Navy until he was like 60 and had to get thrown out to get the nuclear submarine program going because one person was in charge of it. Now, was he a good person, a bad person? I don't know. The stories are that he was a tyrant. I don't know. But the fact of the matter is one dude with a name was on Capitol Hill testifying in front of Congress, probably more than he was doing anything else. And he had responsibility. We need somebody with responsibility of big programs so everybody can't point the finger when some replicator shit fucking falls apart because everybody's pointing their finger in different directions. Now we have responsibility and we have accountability. And that's a good thing. So more stay tuned from the Navy robotics and autonomous systems. Looks like it's all going in the right direction. If you work in Navy autonomous and robotic systems, that's your customer now. Get to know them. Okay. Air Force also doing the same things. Not nearly as cool, but they're doing stuff. Great. The Air Force went into a large overhaul, and anybody who works with the Air Force as a customer will not be surprised by this, that this seems like an overhaul of an overhaul they did not too long ago, unfortunately. They went over the whole Air Force generally again and looked at some things that they wanted to get rid of after the last restructure that happened under the last administration. They have gotten rid of agencies. The Airman Development Command is returning to where it was originally in the broader Training Command. Makes sense. They are killing the Integrated Capabilities Command. This higher level organization is going to give back the requirements authorities to major commands like Air Combat Command, Air Mobility Command, so on and so forth. They have reversed combat wing restructuring. They have reorged quite a few Air Force mission centers like information dominance, the nuclear, the air defense are all going away. So they're doing an organizational kind of restructure that is a lot less in what we're seeing from the Army in not only restructuring, but giving more authority, responsibility, direction to the people that they're restructuring. So it's to be seen how aggressively the Air Force takes on these new warfighting acquisition system reforms. We will see, but it's a start. And last but not least, my core, my fellow Bella Woodsmen, my two full Hundins. The Marine Corps already did their restructure. It's called Force Design 2030. They got rid of a bunch of shit that they didn't need. Big surprise. You can't use tanks if you're island hopping. Marine Corps shit canned that under Force Design 2030. Absolutely right move. Totally contentious. Come at me, bro. It was the right call. Now they're continuing the growth of that. What came out of the death of things in Force Design 2030 birthed new organizations, specifically the littoral combat regiments, the Marines that are right now living inside the threat rings of the Chinese Communist Party. And if the shit goes down, that's who will be fighting tonight, is the Marine Littoral Regiment, specifically the 3rd Marine Littoral Regiment in the Pacific. They have added new organizations to include new combat logistics companies that are going to be stationed in Japan that will support Force Design 2030 and very specifically distributed sustainment across the first island chain. So when we talk about what things matter and what things don't, you can get the unclassified version of the joint warfighting concept. In there, it says one of 4 of the top priorities for the entire Department of War is contested logistics. Well, if we're going to put someone in the Pacific to fight there, you need to keep them sustained. Bullets, beans, Band-Aids, right? Militaries run on their stomach. They need fuel. They need batteries. Someone needs to sustain the fight. So if we're going to have Marines in harm's way, we at least need to equip them to win. These new organizations are going to do explicitly that. If you work in contested logistics, you have a new customer. Okay, so let's get into some news. Let's get into some industry ecosystem news here. If you follow me on LinkedIn, I'm sorry, first and foremost. But if you do, you have noticed I have been angry this week. It's an abusive relationship being in and around the Department of War and the military. It really is. Like, something really good's gonna happen and then something really bad's gonna happen, and like you don't know if you're happy or sad, and you kind of go back and forth, and that could happen on a moment by moment basis. So we've got all this really great warfighting acquisition system reform. It's magic. Again, I will say the people who are inside the building right now that are doing this are the most highly competent and capable professionals that we have in our country to be doing this. Period. Full stop. They are amazing human beings. The things that we're seeing coming out of there in the early days are fire. Love it. Kill JSIDs. Kill it with fire. Yes. And then this week, the final memos come out, and they're a lot fucking weaker than knights in shining armors killing dragons with fire, or whatever the fuck Game of Thrones thing is running through my head right now. It's weak. It's not bad. It's something. I'm not a revolutionary. I'm an incrementalist. I understand that you can't just overhaul the whole world. Goldwater Nichols took 6 years to do, and that was an international incident where we fucking we got embarrassed on the world stage by Iran. It still took 6 years to do Goldwater Nichols. I understand incrementalism. The government moves slow. It's a fucking aircraft carrier that's very hard to turn. I got it. But this memo came out. It was weaker than a lot of us would have liked. It took out a lot of the very, like, the teeth. It had teeth. You must do this. And then I was like, do it if you can. One of these great experts that I think very highly of, Mr. Bill Greenwald, who works over at the Hudson Institute, put out a whole thing on this about what the first memo had, what the second memo had, why the final memo is weaker. I just jumped on Bill's bandwagon and yelled from the top of the mountain of why this is not as good as it should be. Still, we're moving in the right direction. I'm not mad at it. I just wish it had more. We're in a moment now where we can do a lot, and I want to do a lot. And this is a little bit less than what I wanted. Implementation is where this could happen.